Have you ever loved someone so completely that when they disappeared, you spent years quietly deciding it must have been your fault? The Steinways sat in the corner room for 3 hours. 300 guests, open bar, a string quartet in the East Wing. Nobody touched it. Then a man in a driver's uniform sat down. His son climbed onto the bench beside him, and the first note moved through the corridor like something that had been waiting a very long time to be heard. Across the hall, Victoria Mercer set down her champagne glass. Still full. She didn't remember stopping. The evening had been engineered down to the last detail. 300 chairs in ivory upholstery. 1 flower arrangement per table, each standing chest height, filled with white blooms that had no common name and cost more per stem than most people spent on lunch. The chandeliers were calibrated, not dimmed, set to the exact luminosity that made everyone's skin look like they'd just returned from somewhere warm and expensive. Ethan Caldwell stood near the 3rd column from the entrance, holding a key fob in his left hand. His shirt was pressed, but the collar sat slightly off-center, the way collars do when someone irons their own clothes at 6 in the morning before a 7-year-old wakes up. He had parked 4 vehicles in the last 90 minutes. He was waiting on a 5th. Noah stood next to him, one hand wrapped around 2 of his father's fingers. Not the whole hand, just 2 fingers, the way small children hold on when they're not nervous, but want to be sure. He was looking at everything, the flowers, the ceiling, a waiter's silver tray catching light as it turned. In his other hand, he held a small wooden figure, a bear with one ear slightly worn from being held too many times, that he carried everywhere without comment. "Dad!" Noah's voice was slightly too loud, the way it sometimes was when he wasn't monitoring his own volume. "That lady has a dog on her shoes." Ethan crouched slightly. "Don't point." "I'm not pointing, I'm telling." "Same thing, bud." Noah considered this with the focused expression he reserved for things he was not yet willing to concede. This was the problem with bringing Noah to evening functions. Not that he misbehaved. He never misbehaved. The problem was that he noticed everything and had not yet learned that noticing was something you were supposed to keep to yourself. Ethan had been trying to teach him that lesson for 2 years. He wasn't sure he believed in it himself. A current moved through the crowd, a parting, subtle as a tide pulling back from shore. Victoria Mercer walked in. Ethan went very still. He had known she would be here. He had known for 6 weeks, ever since the internal calendar update came through with her name attached to the evening's schedule. He had told himself it didn't matter. He had told himself a lot of things over 12 years, and most of them had been true enough to get him through to the next morning. She was wearing black. She always wore black, or something close to it. He remembered that, the same way he remembered things he'd tried to set down and found he was still carrying. Her hair was different. Everything else was the same. The way she moved through a room as though it had been arranged around her arrival. The way she held her shoulders, not performing confidence, but simply level. The posture of someone who had decided a long time ago not to make herself smaller. She hadn't seen him. He was a man in a driver's uniform standing near a column. People like him were part of the architecture at events like this. He had made his peace with that. Mostly. Richard Ashford materialized at her side, one hand finding the small of her back with the ease of a man who had claimed that particular geography. He leaned in and said something near her ear. She gave a small nod without turning toward him. Then Richard looked up, scanned the corridor, and his gaze moved across Ethan the way you move across furniture. He raised 2 fingers toward a staff coordinator near the wall and tilted his head in Ethan's direction. The coordinator was at Ethan's elbow in 8 seconds. "Sir, staff access tonight is through the service entrance on the north side." "Of course." Ethan looked at Noah. "Come on, bud, we're going the long way." They moved through the edge of the room toward the side corridor. The crowd thinned. Ethan kept Noah close, one hand on his shoulder, guiding him around the outer ring of the event, where the staff moved invisibly between the visible world and the machinery that kept it running. At the corridor entrance, he turned too quickly and walked directly into Richard Ashford. It was a slight collision. Richard had stepped away from the bar, attention on his phone. Ethan caught himself immediately, stepped back, and said the word he had said many times in many rooms. "Sorry." Richard looked up. His expression registered Ethan the way it had all evening, which was to say it registered the uniform and stopped there. "Watch where you're going." "My fault." Richard's gaze dropped briefly to Noah. Something in his face shifted. Not unkind exactly, more the specific discomfort of a man who had not accounted for the presence of a child in his evening and did not know what to do with that variable. Noah, at that moment, lost his grip on the wooden bear. It dropped to the floor between them. Richard looked at it on the marble. Then he reached into the breast pocket of his jacket, produced a folded bill, and dropped it next to the bear. The gesture was fluid, practiced, the automatic response of a man who had learned that throwing money at inconveniences was a form of resolution. He walked away without waiting to see if it was enough. Ethan stood very still for a moment. He looked at the bill on the floor beside his son's bear. He picked up the bear and placed it in Noah's hand. He left the bill where it was. Noah looked at the bear, then at the money on the floor, then at his father's face. "We're not taking that," Ethan said quietly. "Why?" "Because it wasn't given. It was dropped." Noah thought about this for a long time as they continued down the corridor. He was the kind of child who filed things away and returned to them later, sometimes days later, when he had finished working out what they meant. Ethan had learned to wait for those returns. They were usually more accurate than he expected. The long way took them through a narrow corridor and briefly into a small adjoining room before the service route continued. It was used for recitals during the building's public programming, better proportioned than it looked from outside, with sound-softening panels on 2 walls and a Steinway Model D against the far one. Ethan stopped. He didn't mean to. His feet stopped, and the rest of him followed. The piano was older than it appeared. The lacquer had been refinished, but the original finish was still visible along the underside of the lid, dark with age in a way that meant it had been played seriously for a long time. The keys had the faint yellowing of real ivory, not reproduction. He stood in the doorway and looked at the instruments, and what he noticed first was not the quality of the wood or the age of the keys, but the fact that one of the front legs had been shimmed with a folded piece of cardboard. A small imperfection, the kind of thing only someone who had spent time around pianos would notice. He crossed the room, crouched briefly, and looked at the bass. The shim was compensating for an uneven floor, but the adjustment was slightly off, which meant the instrument's resonance chamber was being muffled on the left side. He removed the cardboard, checked the levelness with the flat of his hand against the lid, then folded the cardboard twice and replaced it at a different angle. He pressed his palm to the lid again. Better. The adjustment had taken 40 seconds. He stood, and only then seemed to remember that Noah was watching him from the doorway. Noah looked at him with the expression he used when his father did something that confirmed a version of the world Noah already believed in, but didn't yet have words for. "You knew how to fix it," Noah said. "It was a small thing." "You knew, though." Ethan said nothing. His right hand moved before he decided anything. Not toward the keys, just slightly forward, at his side. A reflex, like reaching for something you'd set down so long ago you'd stopped knowing you were still reaching. Noah looked up at his father's face. "Doing the reading thing." "Dad." Quiet this time. "That piano is really nice." "We're not supposed to be in here." "We're not supposed to be in the main room either. You said that." There was no good answer to that. Ethan looked at the piano for another moment. Then he pulled out the bench, sat down, let Noah climb up beside him. He placed both hands in his lap. Didn't touch the keys yet, just sat there in the quiet of the small room, with the party muffled behind two walls, and looked at the keyboard the way you look at something you once knew well and are not sure you still have the right to approach. His fingers found the opening position. Ethan began to play. The sound didn't announce itself. It arrived the way certain things arrive, not loudly, but with a kind of inevitability that made you feel, afterward, like you had been waiting for it. The first phrase was simple, the kind of simplicity that takes years to arrive at, where every unnecessary note has been removed, and what remains is only what was always true. It moved through the small room, through the half-open door, down the narrow corridor, and out into the edge of the East Hall. Inside the main hall, the string quartet had paused between pieces. Victoria was standing near the center of the room with Richard and two senior partners, holding a glass of still water and listening to a man describe a real estate opportunity in terms that were meant to sound modest and were not. She heard it first as texture, a faint something underneath the conversation. She thought it was the quartet warming up. She didn't turn. Then she heard the second phrase. Every thought she was having stopped. Not gradually, all at once. The second phrase had a shape she knew, the way she knew the layout of a room she'd lived in briefly and not returned to. Not consciously, but in the body, in the way the hands know where the light switch is in the dark. It wasn't familiarity as a pleasant sensation, it was familiarity as a physical fact. Victoria set her water glass down. The man speaking to her kept speaking. She was no longer listening. She didn't decide to move. She was simply aware, a moment later, that she was moving. Through the room, past Richard's hand, which reached out and touched her arm and was not enough to stop her. Past the corridor entrance where a staff member started to speak and then didn't. Down the narrow hallway. She stopped at the doorway of the small room. The man was facing away from her. She could see the width of his shoulders, the slight forward curve of his posture over the keys, engaged the way people lean into things they care about. No sheet music. He wasn't looking at his hands. Beside him, a small boy sat with his eyes closed, head moving in small increments with the rhythm, entirely somewhere else. A wooden bear sat on the bench beside him. Victoria stood very still. The third phrase unfolded, and she felt it move through the base of her sternum in a way that had nothing to do with sound and everything to do with memory. Not a specific memory, the space around a memory, the shape left behind by something that has been removed. She pressed one hand flat against the door frame. There was only one person who had ever written that phrase, only one person who had played it for her, in a small practice room with a single incandescent bulb, sitting beside her on a narrow bench, telling her to take off her shoes and feel the resonance through the floor. She had laughed at him then, done it anyway. He had been right, which was something she remembered refusing to admit at the time. That person was gone, had been gone for 12 years. The melody moved into its final phrase, the unresolved one. The one he had never finished. The one he used to say was waiting for something he hadn't found yet. The man at the piano let the last chord decay into silence. Didn't move. Noah opened his eyes, looked up at his father's profile for a long moment. Then he saw the woman in the doorway. He raised his hand in a small wave. Victoria could not wave back. She stood at the threshold of that small room and did not breathe, and the silence where the music had been was louder than the music. Richard arrived 40 seconds after the music stopped. He stepped past her into the room and surveyed it with the particular efficiency of a man encountering something that had wandered into the wrong category. This space is reserved. His tone was polished, pleasant, the kind of polished pleasant that functions as a closed door. How did you get in here? Ethan turned from the piano, stood, rested one hand on Noah's shoulder. He looked at Richard with the expression of someone who had been looked at this way many times and had developed not immunity, but a specific stillness in response. My fault. We were being rerouted. I should have taken the north exit. Yes, Richard smiled. You should have. He let that sit. It was a practice technique, the agreement that is really a sentence. And this. He gestured at the piano, at Noah, at the general situation. You understand this isn't appropriate for a corporate event. We're leaving. I know you are. Richard's head tilted slightly. I'm just wondering how a driver ends up in a private recital room on the night of a client event. He nodded toward Noah. And whether bringing a child to a function like this was something you discussed with your supervisor. Noah looked up at his father. He hadn't followed all of it. He'd followed enough. Ethan's hand tightened slightly on his son's shoulder. Released. An older man near the doorway had paused to watch. Thomas Renfield, a board member with the comfortable authority of someone who had been in enough rooms to stop being impressed by them, stepped forward and addressed Ethan directly. Remarkable playing. That melody. I didn't recognize it. Before Ethan could answer, Richard cut in. Tom, I appreciate that, but I don't think we need to. I was speaking to the young man. Renfield completed his sentence. Richard absorbed this. His smile didn't change. His eyes did. Original composition, Ethan said. His voice was quieter now, directed at Renfield as though the rest of the room had reduced to background. Not from any repertoire. You wrote it? A pause. Something passed through Ethan's expression and was quickly gone. Someone I knew. Renfield nodded slowly. There was a quality of genuine attention in how he listened, the kind that money could buy a great many things except. The left-hand movement in the second phrase, the way you resolved that suspended fourth, I haven't heard anything like that outside of a concert hall. Richard laughed. The short, dismissive laugh designed to make the previous moment feel like a minor absurdity. Tom, this is the company's driver. I think we can return to the event. She prefers the first seat on the left side. Ethan's eyes had moved. They were on Victoria now, and his voice was low, carrying no more volume than the room required. When she's listening to a live performance, first seat, left side, because the bass resonance from the sustain pedal moves up through the floorboards and she can feel it through her feet. He paused. She used to take off her shoes for it. The room stopped. Not dramatically, the way a clock stops. A small, sudden, total silence in the mechanism of the moment. Victoria's hand was still on the doorframe. Nobody on earth knew that. Nothing in any interview, any profile, any piece of coverage that had followed her career. It was a piece of information that existed only in the memory of one person. One person who had been in that practice room with her. One person who had been right about the floor. Richard turned back to Ethan. The pleasantness had hardened into something that was pleasantness in form and pressure in substance. What did you just say? Ethan looked at him for exactly 1 second. Then he looked at Noah. Come on. He took his son's hand and started for the door. Richard moved. Not to stop them exactly. He stepped to the side and, with the flat of his palm, pushed the piano lid down. The lid came down hard on the keys, a percussive crash of wood on ivory, and Ethan's hand, which had been resting on the edge of the keyboard as he rose from the bench, caught the corner. The room went very still. Ethan looked at his right hand. The old scar on the back of it, pale and years faded, had a fresh mark now at its edge where the wood had caught. He closed his hand into a fist, opened it, said nothing. Noah was looking at his father's hand with the silent, absolute focus of a child who has learned to read alarm in the small movements of the only person in the world he completely trusts. "Richard?" Victoria's voice was completely flat. He turned. "I didn't," he started, and then stopped, because the expression on her face was one he had never seen before. Not in 3 years. Not in the 4 times she had used that particular voice with him. This was something underneath the voice, something that had been there long before he arrived. He tried again. The situation was getting out of hand. "You brought your hand down on a piano lid while his was still on the keys." "It was an accident." Victoria looked at Ethan's hand, at the faint mark where the wood had caught the old scar, at Noah, who was still looking at his father's fist, small and serious, and doing the reading thing with all of himself. She looked at Richard for a long time, long enough that it stopped being a pause and became something else. "We're done for the evening," she said, "you and I." Richard looked at her for exactly the moment it took him to understand she did not mean the party. Ethan took his son's hand and walked out of the room. Noah glanced back once at Victoria as they passed. His face was open, uncalculated, the face of a child who had been somewhere interesting and was not sure why the adults seemed upset about it. Richard was still standing at the piano when she turned and walked out after them. "But I bought a link." She found Richard in the main corridor 30 seconds later, already reconstructing himself. He had the posture of a man who has decided the most effective move is to treat the current moment as a temporary interruption. "Victoria?" His voice was measured, patient, the voice he used in negotiations when he wanted the other party to feel that time was on his side. "What happened in there was..." "I know what happened in there." The man was... "Stop." She looked at him. 3 years of looking at him. "You heard that music. You stood in that room and you heard it. And your first question was about access protocol. Then you dropped money on the floor next to a 7-year-old's toy because it was the easiest way to make a child-sized problem disappear. And then you closed a piano lid on a man's hand because he said something that made you feel small." A beat. Richard's jaw moved. "I've been thinking about something one of the program directors at our family foundation mentioned last month," Victoria continued, her voice staying level. She talked about how the past few years have created what she called a post-pandemic cognitive fog, a kind of blunting where people move through their days processing everything through efficiency and missing the actual texture of things, the actual weight of things. She looked at him steadily. "I think you've had that for a very long time, long before any pandemic." "I'm not attacking you, Richard. I'm telling you what I see." She reached into her left hand with her right. The ring came off cleanly. She set it on the nearest surface, a small side table near the corridor entrance. The sound it made against the wood was almost nothing. He looked at the ring, then at her. Margaret Hartwell, wife of one of the senior partners, was standing near enough to have heard. She set her champagne glass down very slowly. "The partnership documentation is valid," Victoria said. "You'll get everything you came here for tonight." She met his eyes one last time. "That should mean something to you." She walked to the far end of the hall, where her father stood near the windows with Thomas Renfield and 2 investors from the Chicago syndicate. He saw her coming. He read her face. He said something brief to the group and came forward. "Victoria?" Careful. Her father's voice was always careful. She stopped in front of him and looked at his face, which she had loved and trusted for 32 years, and felt the specific exhaustion of having been managed by someone who loved you. "Daniel Reese," she said. He didn't answer. Which was an answer. "He's here. He has been for 14 months. She watched his face. "Did you know?" Her father's jaw set. He had the expression of a man who has always been able to reframe the story and is now standing in front of someone who has read the original. "What I did because I know what you did." Her voice stayed level. "I spent 12 years building this company on the story you let me believe. A story about a man who chose to leave. A story that turned out to be a transaction." She looked at the city through the windows, at the shape of the building reflected in dark glass. "You can have the partnership. You can have the Hartley deal and everything you engineered tonight. I'm going to take Meridian and build something that belongs to me, not to the story." She turned to go. Behind her, Renfield said, in the tone of a man who has been listening from the correct distance for the entire evening, "I'll have my team send the revised terms to Meridian directly." He was not speaking to her father. He was not speaking to Richard. He was speaking to the room, which is how men like Renfield made decisions that other people then had to live with. Her father turned. "Thomas?" "The foundation I've been considering for the arts education portfolio." Renfield picked up his jacket from the back of a chair. "I'd like to discuss it with your daughter, at her new offices." He followed Victoria toward the exit. One of the Chicago investors looked at his colleague. Something passed between them, the silent recalculation of men who follow opportunity with the same faithfulness that others reserve for principle. They gathered their things. Her father stood at the window. 300 people in the room. The ones who mattered were leaving. "This is the She found him in the parking structure at 10:47 p.m. Level 2. Black sedan, rear door open. Noah being guided into the back seat with the patient, focused attention of someone doing the 87th repetition of a familiar task. Reaching across in the dark to find the buckle. Checking the fit. Checking again. Noah's eyes were already half closed. He was done with the evening. The wooden bear was tucked beside him. She stood behind Ethan and waited. He knew she was there. She could tell by the slight change in his movements. Not startled, just aware. He finished with the buckle, straightened, closed the door softly, turned. "Who are you?" she said. He looked at her and didn't answer immediately. Not evasion. He was making a decision she could see the surface of, but not the substance. "Ethan Caldwell, employee code E447, driver and maintenance staff, Mercer Group, 14 months. "That's not what I asked." "I know." She looked at his hands. In the flat overhead light of the parking structure, the scar on his right hand was clear, a line of paler skin running from the base of the middle finger across the back of the hand toward the wrist. Old scar, years of fading, the fresh mark from the piano lid at its edge. The structure of the world went sideways. Fluorescent light, one of 2 bulbs, intermittent and flickering. The smell of pencil erasure and cold coffee and something like resin. A narrow bench, her own bare feet on hardwood. A voice beside her, close. "Close your eyes. Feel it through the floor. Trust the floor." Then, cutting through the warmth of that, a different room. A hospital corridor. A man, 22 years old, hand wrapped in cloth, sitting across a desk from her father. A check on the surface between them. The young man's face not angry, not calculating, just the face of someone who has run out of a particular kind of options and knows it. Her father's voice. "You love her." Then disappear. "I know about your mother. I know what the surgery costs." The young man's hand, moving toward the pen. She opened her eyes. "Daniel." Her voice came out smaller than she meant. "Your name was Daniel." He didn't flinch. He also didn't confirm it immediately. He stood there, looking at her, with the same stillness he'd carried through every room that night. The stillness that was not passivity, but a specific kind of endurance. "Daniel Reese," he said finally. "That's who I was." "Who you were. Who I was." She stared at him. The parking structure hummed. In the car behind him, Noah had fully drifted to sleep, head tilted against the window, one small hand open on the seat, the other curled around the wooden bear. "You changed your name," she said, still processing. "Yes. After you left. After I left. You were going to let me go on not knowing." Not a question. Yes. She absorbed this. Why? He looked at her for a long time, choosing between a mercy and a truth, and deciding at the last moment that the person in front of him was owed the truth. "Because I left, Victoria. Whether I had a reason or not, I left. You built something. I didn't think the reason made the leaving smaller. I spent 12 years thinking you chose to go." Something crossed his face. Brief. Controlled. "I know. I want you to explain." Her voice came out harder than she intended. "I want you to tell me what reason a person has for disappearing and letting the other person believe for 12 years that they weren't enough." The quiet that followed had weight. You could feel it on your skin. He told her. "Not all of it. Not the way you describe something complete. The way you describe something you have never put into words before and are choosing your way through carefully." His mother, the diagnosis, the cost. Her father on the other side of a desk in an office that Ethan had waited 3 hours to be admitted to. The paper, what was written on it. He didn't tell it with emotion. He told it the way you relay facts you've made peace with. Not indifferently, steadily. The way someone reads coordinates rather than describing the landscape. She listened. She stood in the parking structure of her own family's building, in a dress that cost more than his monthly salary, and listened to a man explain in a quiet voice how her father had purchased his absence for the price of a surgery. How he had left not because she wasn't enough, but because her father had found the only lever that worked. The one person Ethan would not gamble with. She didn't cry. The feeling was too large for crying. It was something colder and more structural, like learning that a building you'd stood in your whole life had been built on a fault line. She looked at the scar on his hand. The accident. Coming back from the hospital, after the surgery. His voice stayed even. Road was wet. Car door, not another vehicle. No one else involved. "You were alone." "Yes." She looked at him. He looked back. 20 centimeters between them and the distance of everything they had both become. "Your mother." Her throat tightened. "Is she?" "She died 7 years ago. The surgery gave her 9 good years. She saw Noah born." Something in his face changed then, something he didn't quite manage to flatten in time. She liked him a lot. Victoria looked at the car, at the sleeping boy against the window. "What's his name?" "Noah." She looked at the child for a long moment. "He looks like you." Her voice was very quiet. The shape of his face. "People say that." She turned back to him. Her left hand was at her right wrist, she realized. That useless 12-year-old reflex. "I didn't know," she said. "I want you to know that I didn't know." He looked at her with the steady, careful attention he'd given her all night. "I know," he said. "Go." She went. The next 3 months later, the offices of Meridian Creative Trust occupied 2 floors of a building on 46th Street, with south-facing windows that caught the afternoon light and walls painted the color of paper that has been used and kept. Not the largest offices in the city, not the most expensively fitted, but hers. Victoria was reviewing the staffing report for the community program division that Meridian had launched in February. The program placed working musicians in after-school residencies across 3 boroughs, with a specific strand for children with hearing differences. The kind of early music access that research called motivational and family-centered, and that grant committees described with words like transformational. Victoria called it necessary. The distinction mattered to her. It was not the most commercially prominent initiative she ran. It was the one she checked first, every morning. She turned a page, stopped. Under the heading Program Leads, 3rd entry, Caldwell, Ethan, Music Residency Coordinator. Start date, February 12th. She stood with the report in her hands for a moment, thought about calling through the program director, thought about a number of things that were the administrative equivalent of knocking on a door from very far away. She walked to room 14B. Small room, better acoustic panels than the original, refinished hardwood, a window enlarged to let in more afternoon light, a Yamaha upright against the far wall, years of actual use in it, which was the right kind of piano for this space. Children's drawings on the corkboard beside the door, done in marker and crayon. One near the top right showed a person at a piano with very large hands and a small figure beside them. The small figure had something tucked under its arm that might have been a bear. Just below it, a little girl from the Tuesday group had drawn a sun with 17 rays and labeled it, in careful crayon letters, the music room. Ethan was at his desk. He looked up, not surprised. There was that quality again, the quality of someone who has stopped being startled when the world behaves well. "I saw your name on the report," she said. "3rd page is respectable." She stepped into the room, looked at the drawing near the top of the board. "Noah drew everything in the top row," he said. "The bottom 2 rows are the Tuesday group, 11 kids, ages 6 to 9. He paused. "Noah comes on Tuesdays sometimes. He likes an audience." She looked at the drawing for another moment, then at him. "I talked to the board about a dedicated funding strand for parents with hearing-impaired children. Access to early music education. There's enough in the Meridian endowment to..." "Victoria." She stopped. He looked at her steadily, not unkindly. "You don't need to fund things at me." She looked at the floor. There was a small scuff mark on the hardwood near the piano bench, where children had repeatedly climbed up from the same angle. "I know," she said. "The funding is good. The program needs it. I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm telling you that when you walk in here, you don't need a justification." She looked at him. He looked back with the patient, direct attention that still did something specific to her equilibrium. There was something genuinely inspirational about the steadiness of it, the way he had built a life that was entirely without performance, entirely without the need to be recognized as the thing he actually was. "I came to ask if you would play it again." He didn't ask which piece. He moved to the piano bench, sat. His hands settled over the keys with the ease of someone returning to the only language they had always been fluent in, regardless of what else changed around them. She pulled the single chair to the left side of the room, the first chair on the left. She sat down. She reached down and removed her shoes, both of them, placed neatly under the chair, set her bare feet flat on the floor. She felt the first note move up through the wood before she registered it in the air. She closed her eyes. The melody began where it had always begun. The simple phrase, the essential one, stripped of everything unnecessary. It moved through the room and through the floor and up through the soles of her feet, and she let it, the way she had learned to let it in a small practice room at 20 years old, when a person she trusted had asked her to trust the floor. The door opened very quietly. the particular shuffle of small feet on hard wood. Then, the slight vibration that moved through the room when a small hand was placed on the side of the piano. She opened her eyes. Noah was standing next to the piano with one palm pressed flat against the body of the instrument, feeling the resonance move through the wood into his hand. Eyes open, watching his father's hands on the keys with the focused, serious expression he used when something mattered to him. He turned, looked at Victoria. She looked back. "You're in my chair," he said. "I'm sorry, is this your usual spot?" He considered this with genuine gravity. "I use the right side because it's closer to the sustain pedal. But left is good too." He looked at the floor, then at her feet. "Why are you barefoot?" "Your father told me to." Noah looked at his father's back at her. He accepted this as sufficient explanation and moved to the right side of the piano, placed his hand back on the body of the instrument, stood there. Ethan kept playing. The melody moved into the second phrase, the more complex one, the one that used to stop partway through. This time, he didn't stop. He moved through the second phrase and into the third, the unresolved one. The one he had told her was waiting for something he hadn't found yet. She had asked, sitting beside him the first time she heard it, why he wouldn't finish it. He had said, "I don't know how it ends. I only know what it's about." She had asked what it was about. He had said, "Staying." The melody found its resolution. Not the ending she would have predicted, not the comfortable chord. One step to the side of where she expected, and for that reason, more true. The final note decayed. The room held the silence after it. Noah kept his hand on the piano for a moment after the sound had gone, feeling whatever remained. Then he looked at Victoria. "It's better with the ending." "Yes," she said. "It is." She was still barefoot. The floor was warm from the afternoon light. Ethan turned on the bench. He looked at his son. He looked at her. He didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. They had, between them, said quite a lot already. Some of it with words, some of it with 12 years, some of it with a parking structure and a scar and a ring on a side table. What remained was this. A room with good light and a piano that had been played seriously for a long time, and a child with his hand pressed flat against the wood, learning the shape of sound. There's a particular kind of post-pandemic cognitive fog that settled over a lot of people in the years that followed everything that happened. A blunting of the senses, a tendency to process rather than feel. Victoria had thought, for a while, that the sharpness she'd regained in building Meridian was a cure for it. She understood now that the sharpness had only been a different form of distance. What she was sitting in now, in room 14B, with her feet on the floor and someone else's music moving through the wood, was something else entirely. Something she didn't have a word for yet. Something she was willing to learn. Some people spend their whole lives building walls high enough that the thing they were protecting themselves from can no longer get in. And then one day, something finds its way through. Not through a gap, through the wall itself. The way music moves through solid things, through floors and bones, and the 12-year silences between two people who once knew each other's language. He had written the melody without knowing how it would end. He had only known what it was about. Outside the window, the city moved the way it always moved, loud and indifferent, and full of people going toward things they hoped were still there. In room 14B, a man sat at a piano. A child stood with his hand on the wood, feeling sound travel through solid things into his palm, the most honest form of listening there is. A woman sat with her feet on the floor. The door was opened. The light came in. No two,